Peace, everyone. On today's episode of Clarity, we're interviewing Susan Riley, therapist, about mental health. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll be.
yeah, got it, got
My
it.
computer
Okay.
is jumping to my phone and back. It's just very,
Yeah, yeah,
Apple
it's
is.
confusing.
Yeah.
Not a problem. So I guess I want to make sure that this is told because I think it's really important. Of course, my name is Luisa. I'm a mother, an employee, as an accountant. I do collections. I am also very active at Gethsemane Lutheran Church. I'm a youth leader, as well as preparation to go back to school as a seminarian, and also put in my application for the ELCA and waiting to be approved to be part of their council in our future for our church as a whole. And so that's my background. And what I feel is this topic is so important. I'm so excited that Susan's here, and I'm so glad that Reyna's doing this, is that, being a person of color and in a community with, predominantly, predominantly Latinos and Latinas and Latinos. And there's a misconception about your mental health, about seeing therapists and seeing a psychologist. And, with our strong background with in my Mexican heritage is that, if you see a therapist or a psychiatrist and talk about your issues, it's because there's something wrong with you. And that needs to be put off of everybody's mind that there is nothing wrong. It's always important to talk to someone that may be outside of your circle. I'm a strong believer with teens nowadays seeing therapists. For the fact is, unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak to my parents about issues with me because they're my parents. They're not. I can't talk to them. It's like, okay, that's kind of weird, and with my daughter, I think it's important for her mental health because social media is a huge interference with our children's lives, as well as these Snapchats and all these craziness that's out there. And I think it's important that we're able to express into others outside of our circle and not be judged and be able to hear what we didn't think we could have access to, or being able to understand it in a different way. This is the reason why I see Susan. Susan has been a huge part in my process of recircling and defeating my, I guess you could say, my demons inside. And so I just want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with me. My imperfections is what makes me perfect. And I've been very thankful to have been not only with Susan, but as in my growth in my church, to have that moral support.
Yes. Well, if you like, I'll introduce myself.
Yes.
Try and make it brief. I became a counselor 22 years ago, and over 22 years ago, and I'd done other things. And I had just finished my degree, and I was working at a place that was publicly funded for what is often called the underserved population, folks that are not from the dominant culture of Caucasians and those with money. These were kind of considered throwaway people. They were black, brown, they were poor, they had no insurance, they had very limited resources. Most of them had been in jail or prison, and nobody cared about them. And it was such a blessing that as soon as I started working with these individuals, I found them to be caring, responsible, doing what they could under very challenging circumstances to take care of themselves, their family members, to reintegrate with the community, even when the community rejected them. And with the last one, like Riley, I'm Irish. And the Irish are storytellers. And that's what counseling and therapy is. You tell your story. And sometimes a person can start with somebody like me, but oftentimes we will start with our parents, our siblings, a favorite aunt, a much loved grandparent, and a dear friend. And as we tell our story and we get heard and validated, we get what I call grace. We start to feel more whole. We start to care about ourselves. Our self-esteem improves. And support, the inner circle, and then the next circle is your community. And many individuals are blessed with having a church community that they can turn to. And I heartily agree with Louisa's idea about having space for adolescents and teens to talk with each other, monitored by a caring adult. It's huge. It's wonderful that the church is doing this and that you're doing this, all of you. So
thank you for that introduction, Susan. My name is Reyna, and this is episode 4, and it's about mental health. And I agree with what you said because, like I said, being Hispanic and Mexican, it happened. And it's sad, but that's life, and there's so much our parents can do. And there was a mentor in my life, which was one of my teachers, and I feel like if she wasn't there, I don't know where I would have been right now.
That's true.
You know what I find interesting, both Susan and Reyna, is, growing up, my parents, you don't see a therapist. It's just,
right.
No, you don't do that. And I did grow up very troublesome, and I got into my own fair shares of not supposed to's. And I did lean on my church a lot, and the support I had was through my pastor. She retired already, and I think if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So it's great that we have that support, and we try to offer the support as well to our teens at the school. I mean, at the church, our preteens. But sometimes I think where might be an issue, Susan, is that we've seen these teens grow up and we know their parents, and they may see us not as a youth leader anymore, or more as a figure of family. And so my concern is, or how do we approach it, is how do we have these teens understand that we separate our leadership, or try to speak to the parents of, hey, we feel that maybe some type of talking to outside of their circle of norm is important.
Let's see if I can, because this is what I've seen even since I was a kid. Having a need for other people that are not your blood relatives or your in-laws as a place to talk about your concerns, to talk about your fears, has always been very helpful. And that has been something that has been encouraged in schools at times. And I've seen it encouraged at churches. I used to go to a Lutheran church in Downers Grove called Gloria Dei. And the pastor, I got to know, this was some years ago, was a wonderful storyteller. I just try to explain to people, it's good if they've got peers that they can talk to. And this is, it's limited in some ways. And the person that helps to monitor it and guide it is there for this time. It won't necessarily continue after the group is done. Is this helpful in answering your question?
It does.
Okay.
It does help, yes.
Yeah, in some ways you end up, in some ways, you take on kind of like a quasi-counselor therapist role, which was very common back in the 70s. I've got a dear friend who's a natural therapist. She hates school. I said, I'd sponsor you, go back to school. Anyway, because she had such wonderful experience working with men and women, she volunteered counseling services for years. That's not done anymore. I should say there's some exceptions. There's peer counselors in the substance use disorder community that get very involved. They've had the same experience. So, at least from what I've seen, if you've got a group like that that's developed for a specific time frame, you can use the same kind of language that I use. You know, you and I could work for a period of months. You know, if there's a lot of stuff you need to process, it could take a while. It could be a year. I often take a look at everything that's ever happened to the person. Because that colors how they act in their own life. And I say, and then when we're done, I will have walked with you through some of your concerns, and then we will part ways. And if you need me, I'm still going to be around. But now you have what you need. I don't want to foster dependency. That's considered unethical. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
A lot of this is the same kind of introductory language I use. I've worked with Grow Wellness now for 3 years, and we all share ideas. And I try to explain that to clients. This is finite. This is not lifelong. You know, I will be with you for a time if it feels right for you, and then we will part ways because you have got whatever you need. And that's the point of this. Does that help?
Now, I do have another question. Now, there's books out there, you know, your self-help books and, you know, and all these things. And, you know, there's a couple I'm reading. There's one that Reyna had introduced me, and I've mentioned to you, Susan. It's breaking the cycle of basically of abuse mentally and emotionally. And then also I'm reading another book, Michelle Obama's uh, Coming to Light. And these books are great, you know, but I feel that they're kind of like a cover up in the sense of bandage things and, you know, do this and do that, and kind of steering away of seeing a therapist. And I guess trying to make clear, I guess, for others that may feel dependent on these type of books, and understanding that these are guidance, or seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist or a counselor, how different these two things are. I don't know if you understand, and just trying to explain that.
And I understand what you mean. So I'm a great believer in handouts. When I'm working with a client, I'm asking them to please look at the handout. If it makes sense to you, pick and choose what feels right. And try to incorporate whatever thoughts feel right to you into your life, into how you operate, how you think about yourself. I've done a lot of work with people that have been traumatized, and their self-image is in shreds. Books, handouts, workbooks, videos, YouTube stuff. There's even some good stuff on YouTube. Is a wonderful aid, but there is something about sitting with a person. And I'm going to praise my own profession. Anybody that's a licensed therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you have the opportunity to interact with the person. And that feeling of connection. The body language shows the feeling that a person can have. You get it. You understand. Most or all of the things that I've been through. And then we start to collaborate. It's always two people working together. It's not top down. I'm not the boss. The client is. So I ask them, share and let's brainstorm and walk together and try this week. And this book is great. You can pick and choose. You know, I've had to work with people that had to deal with parents that had borderline personality disorder, which is very challenging, especially for the family members, but also for the person who has it. And there's some great workbooks out there. I've worked with people with serious substance use issues. Hundreds of great workbooks out there, but they do not replace individual group counseling or family counseling or couples counseling. So and it is too bad there is still so much mental health stigma. There shouldn't be. There are statistics out there that at least, and it depends on who you listen to, at least 20, about half of us will go through an episode of depression in our lifetime. I don't mind disclosing, I've had to deal with some things that were very tough, but I sought support. So
I think support is very important because the teacher that I mentioned, I mean, it wasn't just her, it was a lot of things like reading books, listening to videos, going to therapy. I feel like all of that helped me. And who knows, maybe just one thing wasn't going to be enough for me. And I did everything possible that I could, you know, get my hands into so that I can have some guidance, some clarity. And one of them is going out on a bike ride. Like I said, reading, doing something that I like. And nowadays with teens, I feel like I try to help teens, but I feel like somehow they're like rejecting me. And in those instances, I don't know what to do, but just to give them space. And because I was a teenager once, and I think giving them space is good for them until they're ready. I mean, that's just my opinion.
it's pretty accurate. People, at least what I've seen, an individual will respond to you when they're ready. They will share what they can when they can, and we can't dictate that.
Now, Susan, with concerns of teens,
Uh-huh.
I feel that adults are probably getting a little more into seeing therapists, because I know in a lot of people now as adults
Right.
see therapists, and as I see in teens, there might not be some openness on that, and I'm going to share someone. I will not disclose their name, but a friend of mine that I knew in the military had a daughter that cheerleader, straight A student, senior in high school, and just had a future going for her, and unfortunately took her own life. And
Oh
there was
dear.
no signs,
Oh.
at least there was no
That
signs that
everybody
the
could see?
parents noticed,
Yeah.
and so is, being as parents and being as leaders, how can we prevent something like this from happening? There has to be some kind of sign that we could try to reach out to our teens.
Okay. This is a thought you could say as a caring adult member of this church. Just, that's the framework for it. You could just be open about it. Say, sometimes people feel really, really depressed and they can't see a way out. Will you please come to me or any other adult that you trust within the church, at home, wherever you are? If you're hurting, you do not have to be alone. That's the best we can do. And I'm a mandated reporter. If anybody says something about wanting to hurt themselves or somebody else, or abuse or neglect a child, a senior citizen, or somebody who's by disabled, by ethics and law, I have to intervene. And I have. Not very many times, but I have. I treat this is a safety thing, not only for the individual, but for the whole community. So you can just be kind of upfront about it. And you can say, if you're really concerned, if you have a private talk with the teen, you say, if you're really concerned, I will be with you and help you find some help.
It's interesting that you say that, Susan, because as leaders, especially roles of pastor, myself as in school, you know, um, we have to report things like this
Yes.
if there's any type of danger, because of our
Yes.
responsibilities, and we can't be
Same
held responsible for it
rules
too.
that govern
Yes.
it, the same rules. Yep.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting you saying that is that you needing to report it is, you are in that role, of listening to others,
Uh-huh.
and right now, as I was in school the previous semester, we had to take a class, only one class, about children, about preventing, type of abuse and how we're supposed to report it. That's all that's required, one class. So there's so much more from what it sounds like, from what you're saying, and the depth of what you probably went to school to do.
Right.
It's like, how important is this for our educators as leaders, that we need to make this aware, not only within our church, the importance of these actions of reporting and not brushing it underneath, but expressing it as a ELCA type of thing.
Right. I think a way, for instance, for a church community, and pastor, I have no doubt you have any number of ways you could speak of this, but you could say, this church and all the members in it have a concern for anybody in this congregation and anybody in our community. There is discussion about abuse and neglect of little children sexual abuse, molestation, horrible things can happen to our most vulnerable. Pastor, perhaps you have some ways that you could say it from your own pulpit, how you could communicate it to your congregation.
You're on mute, Pastor.
Oh, okay. Is it going to cooperate?
Let's see.
I heard something. I don't know.
I heard something.
Not cooperating so far? Okay.
I was gonna, well, Pastor
Does that
gets.
work? Hello,
Oh.
hello?
Hello? Yeah, oh, we can hear you.
Hey! Oh my God. Okay. Sorry, y'all. This is wild. I'm talking through my AirPods. But no, I appreciate Susan. I appreciate what everybody said, and I think if I were to if what you just said was a prompt, Susan, I would oh, did I freeze now? Oh boy. Oh boy.
See you.
Oh, am I back?
See
Hello, hello?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I hear you.
It's a wild day. I was gonna say, Susan, if what you just said was a prompt. Oh, am I gone again?
No.
Oh, okay. You're such a good listener. I thought it went silent. See, if what you just said was a prompt, I would probably, you're talking about the most vulnerable and so on, and those lists of harms you listed happen, of course, in the church, in church families, and in society, and that's lifted up more and more every day. But I do think, the very simple, like very easy, intersection there, at least in terms of faith, is like, I mean, the whole gospel is about care for the most vulnerable. I mean, and I think, in terms of stigma, I'm with all of y'all. I mean, I think, well, you two know, I was, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I went to AA. I started going to AA a bunch of years ago, 10 years ago, but I remember telling my family, and it was kind of like, what is there something, it's like a surprise, and kind of like Luisa said, you're treating, it's like, maybe if you gotta go, okay, but that this is, you're gonna get fixed and then you'll leave, but the sense of an ongoing need for like healthy diet, healthy exercise, healthy mental health, that kind of sense of caring for oneself isn't there, and I think it's something we lost in the church a little bit. We used to talk about it more as like spiritual health, like spiritual development, right? But like also becoming at ease with that grace that you talked about, and for us it's a theology, but whatever, say similar stuff, right? And being Paul Tillich used to say, accept the fact that you're accepted, right? Like to be, and he kind of was following Carl Jung on that, right? So like it was just so anyway, that was a very roundabout way of saying, yeah, I think like what you do, I just don't, it shouldn't be stigmatized in the church, but where it is, I do think we do have a responsibility, not simply to destigmatize, but really speak to the benefits of
Yes.
maintaining health.
Yeah. One of the things that I sent over is something called the ACEs study that was done for 2 years by Kaiser Permanente, funded by the government, 1995 to 1997. Which suburb in Southern California? Bunch of white kids. Mommy and daddy have lots of money. They live in nice houses. And it was a study initially about the concerns about obesity, because it's a big issue for health. Adolescents and teens, and, lifelong medical problems and all kinds of other problems because of this. The doctor is interviewing a young man, an adolescent, and is asking kind of the general intake question and asked something about sexuality, and he phrased it just a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And this poor kid burst into tears and disclosed being sexually abused.
Hmm.
And then all of them, Kaiser Permanente is huge. It's been a huge research tank, and they've done more in the way of federal studies on many health issues. And they decided to keep working on it. And they identified there are 10 questions, which is why I sent through some of that stuff. 10 questions that anybody can look at. And if you've got a kid in the community that there's a history of substance use disorder in the family, somebody's been in prison, they've witnessed violence, they've been physically and emotionally and verbally abused, they've been sexually molested, they've been raped, there's extreme poverty, they've experienced racism. Of course, this study was expanded to include the people that are usually, they're not considered important to the dominant culture, which bugs the heck out of me. So if you've got those issues, or if your housing wasn't secure, if you didn't get enough food, if you didn't have some adult in your life that cared about you and knew you, then you were if you got 5 or more questions, yes answers to this 10 question thing, you were at increased risk of mental and emotional problems, occupational problems, educational problems, substance use disorder problems, every kind of chronic medical problem you can think of, diabetes, heart disease, and your life could be shortened by 10 years. So this kind of holistic approach is the basis for every therapy that you can think of, because we all ask about early life in one fashion or another. And if any community can start encouraging, come to us, like if you start to hear, Dad's got a substance use problem, my brother's in prison, I've seen my mom beaten up, whatever it may be, those are kind of warning signs. And it's not like I'm asking anybody to try and be an unlicensed therapist, but you 3 know your community. You can just be aware, pay attention. And for instance, Grow Wellness, we've got at least 15 or 20 of some of the best childhood and adolescent and teen therapists I've ever met. They're cool to the kids, which is what they, and the parents. So there's all kinds of resources out there. There's resources in every single community. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I sent that through. I thought it might be useful. Okay.
And can we use those questionnaires at our church so that we can kind of have an idea as to what's going on?
Yeah. If you wish, I can send a whole bunch to Luisa or to whomever, Pastor, if you want to give me your address and how to spell your name. I want to make sure I don't mess that up. I'd be happy to send you several of them, and I'll type out some ideas. Okay, these are my observations, my thoughts. Let's put it this way. It's not my idea to put any of you on the spot, like you have to suddenly be a mental health professional. No, that's not fair. It's also definitely not a good idea. But if you're seeing like what's often called red flags,
Right.
You can be aware of it. You can perhaps have a private conversation with the 12-year-old or the 15-year-old and say, hey, hon, what's going on? And offer encouragement and support and referral. And then except in cases of being a mandated reporter, you have to hope they make that choice.
Mhm.
What if after that, after you asking them, are you okay? And they don't want to open up and they just stop going to church or stop talking to you. What should we do? Should we just keep on insisting or should we just give them time?
This is my approach with people that are cutting off. I've seen this with families and I've seen it in communities. You can do the occasional outreach. Say, let's just pretend you're calling a young guy named Joe. Hey, Joe, haven't seen you in a little while. Hope you're doing okay. We'd love to see you back in the choir or the teen group or whatever you would like. Here's my phone number. You keep doing it. I've suggested that to people who had family members who had cut off from them for whatever reason. And there's efforts to repair. And I say, write them a brief note. Hi, how are you? Easter's coming up. Spring is here. Hope you're doing well. Perhaps we can talk soon. No pressure. It's a bridge. That's what I call it. It's a bridge. That way, if they have a moment of feeling that it would be good to reach out to somebody I know, they've got that bridge.
Okay.
Oh, another nice thing that any church can do, any school can do, get to know some of the resources in your area. Who are the children and adolescent therapists? I'm out in Naperville. People don't necessarily want to travel from, one of the collar counties of Cook County all the way to Naperville. But there's a lot of resources. So get connections with them. Perhaps even, this is just a crazy idea just popped into my head. I'm pretty good at that. You could ask them to come in and give a talk. Perhaps to the whole congregation, or perhaps to the teen group or an adult, whatever.
Yeah, and we've got a real.
And what's nice about
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say what's nice also is now Zoom is such a popular thing.
Yes.
So, and that's how I meet Susan sometimes. So teens don't have to, or even adults don't have to feel that the uncomfortableness in a new area.
What's also nice for counselors and therapists and those in the helping professions, because of the rules and HIPAA regulations about confidentiality, the platforms that we use for doing telehealth are HIPAA compliant. The security is very good. I remember in the early days of the pandemic, and I heard about Zoom stuff being crashed and all kinds of nonsense going on, and people were really concerned about using it. I understand that. So when I'm doing a telehealth session with a client, it's protected. Privacy is protected. That's crucial. So, you could explain that to people. You could, I wouldn't be surprised if you've got some great practitioners in your community.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, thank you for that, and we are really fortunate to have Maurizio, Cicero Family Services is here, and they do bilingual counseling, and are some really great folks, and yeah, we've had Maurizio here a couple of times, but depending on who's here, people miss him, but he's been a really great resource, and they do, I think, like free to sliding scale. So like when you mentioned the working earlier in communities that were oppressed, that's, I think that's always a little bit of tension here in terms of, can I afford it? If there's something whatever bad insurance
Absolutely.
I have, does it cover that, or do I have to get the worst one because I have state insurance? You know, there's all these questions, right? So,
Right.
but we do have, they are like really wonderful folks over there. But it's good to know like y'all are out there too, because I think, yeah, the insurance and money, that's always as you know, a big barrier. So, yeah,
Right.
and documentation status, right? So,
Well, I figure one of the biggest things that any of us can do that are concerned, we can be advocates. This is a public health issue, not just here, but nationwide.
mm-hmm.
Our system does not truly serve everybody. I think we already know that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're having this discussion. I wish it did. You know, I'm old enough that I've heard enough stories. My mom was a nurse. My older sister was a nurse. And we've been talking about mental health stuff since I was like 12.
Right.
So,
And Susan, I have a question. What, as parents, what can we do? What can we say? What can we ask our kids or other kids? I guess mostly as parents, because hopefully parents are watching this. They're going to watch this video too. What can they do to try to figure out what's going on with their kids?
I'm going to kind of paraphrase stuff that I've heard from dozens of great parents that I've talked to. Dozens. Quite a few of them have nothing to do with my work. But I'm thinking about one parent I'm actually working with where that kind of open discussion that did not happen in her family. And because of what she's learned being in therapy with me, she is doing this for her 2 children who are teenagers. Having open discussions with them, listening to them, giving them the time and space. And believe me, I get it. I don't know anybody who isn't crazy busy, parents especially. Trying to make a living, keep the mortgage or the rent paid, get food on the table, whatever, take care of what. They're busy. I hear great stories for the moms and dads that I talk with all the time. And there's ways to do it. You just make it a part of life. Something a really good friend of mine did many years ago when she had young children. I think she started this when they were like 7 and 10. Kind of discussions. Once a week or once a month discussions with the kids. What's going on? You guys got any feedback from me? Think about it. That was pretty revolutionary.
Yeah.
So the kids would be able to say, hey, Mom, I was really pretty upset with the way you spoke to me about my swim meets.
Right.
Yeah. But then it encourages communication, openness, and connection, and safety, and mental health. And, it encourages the full development of everyone involved. So
It's funny you say that, Susan, because I'm just going to give an example.
Let me see if I can give you one of the best examples I ever heard of. For a time, I was a foster mom of a special needs boy. He was 12 years of age. The Cook County foster system was thinking, let's see if we can give him a try in a stable household. And I was talking with a very smart woman that I know who has 5 of her own kids. And when they were adolescents, she and her husband figured out how to get them to talk. This cracked me up. She'd start out dinner conversation. Okay, who did something stupid at school today? In just that kind of tone of voice. Get them to talk about something that makes them laugh.
Yeah.
And then you never know what's going to start happening. And Her kids are now in their 30s. They're well-developed, really good kids. Mom and dad had a lot of really good influence on them. And I have no doubt that every parent who's not completely overwhelmed or seriously struggling is doing what they can. There's a lot of things you can do. Trying to have family dinners once a night, couple of nights a week, if possible. Some time together, some play together.
Yeah, some game boards.
Yes.
It was funny, just the other day, because Isabel and I, we try to have a very open communication on everything. So we're pretty blunt on a lot of things.
Good.
And we went to see her badminton meet, and this was before her procedure, and she didn't do very well, and she kind of moved a little slow, and she lost both of her matches, and she came up to us, and we were kind of cracking jokes with her. Well, we were cracking jokes to her, saying, hey, you need to put some pep into that step. Maybe we need to put a little shock collar on you, just like to make you move faster. And her statement, being very open as she is, she's like, real good parenting skills, Mom. And I was like, ooh, ooh, she's not happy. I'm like, ooh, I'm sorry, So then I knew already, like, okay, she's not in a good mood. Let me find out what the issue is, And so we did talk about it. So it's like, having that open communication is important.
Right. That's what you do. There's a gentleman that I've talked to recently, and his life is just crazy busy. And he's got 4 kids. And he found out taking his 9-year-old daughter to and from dance class was perfect. They're in the car. You can't go anywhere. He has gotten to know her. They've had a lot of fun. They've had some great jokes. And they've really added to their relationship. It's just kind of cool. So he looks forward to taking her to dance.
I think that's really beautiful, and it reminds me of the importance of what you do. I think what we do. I think of this camp we went to this summer, and am I not working again?
Oh no, you're fine. I was agreeing with you.
Oh man, I'm telling you. Yeah. But we went to this. Thank you. We went to this camp this summer. We were sitting around a table together. I just think all of the space making, and I know it's what you do. I know it's what church does best when it does it. It was hard during the pandemic because the spaces were kind of virtual, but man, y'all, those times we've all been unplugged and together and in the same room. Even if we're not saying anything, smart or whatever deep, it's still it feels a lot more sacred. Or we were laying out looking at the stars. Remember that? That was just wild.
It's what, yeah. I remember thinking at the beginning of the pandemic, and in my community, 40% of the population lives alone. And all the mental health facilities worldwide were talking about depression and anxiety rising worldwide. And you've got kids, they're adolescents, they're teens. They're trying to find that next step away from mom and dad and find their own tribe. Their fellow schoolmates, their playmates, the folks they do Dungeons and Dragons with, the folks they do sports with. They're key to their development. And that was hurt by the consequences of a once-in-100-year pandemic that affected everybody on the planet. So at this time of development, it would be understandable if the kids would have been more moody, perhaps a bit more depressed, perhaps a bit more anxious, because we're going back into a more normal lifestyle. So it could take some time for the kids to get through their period of adjustment. Right. And having supportive and caring adults like the 3 of you is very important.
I was gonna say, even like when your kids, for example, they get out of school, or some teenagers work, or from college. I heard that it might not be a good thing to ask them how their day was, but to ask them what fun thing did you do, or what did you learn, or what was funny, did something funny happen?
Yeah, you were telling me about lab class and dissecting a frog. How's the
Right.
frog?
Yeah.
Whatever, a little humor. Or
Right.
you were talking about reading Pride and Prejudice. Is it giving you a headache now because the language is so different?
Right.
Whatever.
It's the little details that that you say that, like, oh wow, my mom listened to me, or my dad remembered.
Yes. Yes. That's key. That's key. Or a kid talks about a bully.
Right.
And you remember. And you
Right.
ask again. Or they talk about a favorite teacher and you remember.
Right. It makes them feel important.
Yes. That you're doing what you can to pay attention.
Yes.
So, and of course, every one of us makes mistakes.
Yes.
There's been times when, I've told friends and family, I've even told clients, I says, I'm sorry, I realized I made a mistake when you and I were talking.
Right.
It's better to be open about it because if you want to encourage that, you have to show it.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a big one. I know that's a big one for ministry. So, yeah.
It can be. It used to be more of a thing for folks that were in the helping professions because a lot of this was kind of an encouragement to like keep yourself above or firmly detached from the people that you're talking with. Now they already know that doesn't work. Some of the old ways that they used to deal with folks that had substance alcohol use disorder were actually very damaging. Unfortunately, they've modified that. And this is in my lifetime. There have been so many mistakes that have been done, but we learn, and we learn from our mistakes.
Right.
Hopefully. I'll just make other ones,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wasn't always like this. Like, I wasn't always asking my kids, what fun thing did you do? Like, I had to learn that. I read about it, I heard about it, or like I've told the pastor, I've even apologized to my kids because I've done mistakes and I said things and done things that I shouldn't have done. And I feel like it's okay to ask for forgiveness to your kids, even though you might think as an adult, I don't need to ask for forgiveness to my kids. I'm the parent, but we do make mistakes.
Right. I tell people that are trying to enhance their relationships, do what you can to be transparent with each other. I've had the pleasure of working with people that were functioning really quite well, nothing, they were just trying to adjust to something. And I always talk about, well, who do you turn to? If you're frustrated or worried or stressed out, who do you turn to? Are you and your spouse close? Are you close with a brother or a sister, aunt, uncle, mom, dad? Do you have other people that you can talk to? And then also just being open about it. So I applaud you for being able to look at your kid, Reyna, and say, gee, hon, I'm sorry I snapped at you.
Right. And I don't think it was hard for me to get used to it because with my parents, they didn't do that. So
Generation. Absolutely.
so I'm like, I would ask myself, is this okay? Are they gonna, step over me? Are they gonna, cross their limits and boundaries? But no, they were okay with it.
Right. And that's one of the best things that adults can do is teach. There's a couple of things, in my view, that an adult can help a younger person work with? How they problem solve. Sit with them. No, you have to figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. You got to figure it out.
Right.
And I'm using much more straightforward language, but I think you get, yeah. Then they start figuring out things and they start making their own attempts to resolve an issue or to try something new. But then you're still present and they can come back to you, say, hey, let me know how it went.
Right.
Like if some 12-year-old is dealing with the bully in the schoolyard.
Right.
Or they're struggling with algebra and they're seeing if they could get any kind of help through the school system. And of course, in some situations, the adult is also involved, but just to get the child, we humans can do that.
Right. It's
And
okay.
And it's very good for us to do that. And oddly enough, I mean, my parents were born in the late 1920s. So they lived through the Great Depression and World War II and Korea and the Vietnam War and the latest efforts at civil rights and women's rights and all the other stuff. They took on some of the beliefs that started to develop in the 70s and 80s, being more open with their children. So even people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, they can change.
Yes.
They can change.
Yeah, I believe that. I wanted to thank Luisa. She had to go, but thank you, Luisa, for your time and your questions and your answers. I hope it, gives others clarity.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I liked sharing ideas with all four of you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you a lot.